So it's the top of the hour. Pat Buchanan is still with us. You survived news you can't use. And joining us now, Democratic governor from Pennsylvania, Governor Ed Rendell, on the set with us. Finally,
Hi, Mika.
Got you in here. And former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer joining the conversation.
Morning.
Thank you so much for coming in. Great panel, great topics to talk with us about the Wikileaks fallout, these 21,000 documents. There's definitely I'd say debate on Capitol Hill and across the board about whether or not they should have been released. And I want to ultimately talk about how this frames the midterms as we move forward. But Ari, first of all, a lot of people criticize the release of CIA information, that it jeopardizes our war efforts. How is this different?
Well, first of all, if it's classified, it shouldn't be leaked.
Right.
And that's a problem in and of itself. And anybody in government's got a serious obligation not to do it. I imagine prosecutions are going to follow. The thing in here that jumped out to me the most, though, was the news about Iran. That Iran's closer ties than people thought to the Taliban and to Al-Qaeda. That is the most troubling of all, because that's what's going to lead to more American lives lost. And if Iran is involved here, it's a real big problem. We thought it was true. According to these documents, it is true.
Pat Buchanan?
Well, it was a revelation inside the documents. A lot of people have pointed to it, including the Wall Street Journal. But I'm a little apprehensive that we got ourselves in two wars over there right now. We're bleeding us $1 trillion out, 5,000 guys dead. I certainly don't want to see another war with Iran.
So let me ask Ed Rendell, look at the headline in the New York Times. Document leak adds pressure to pressure on White House. Policy faces scrutiny. People are going to start looking at this, perhaps more than they have before. I think there has been a renewed interest in general in our policy in Afghanistan. Could this hurt Democrats if they don't find a message on this? Well, do more need to come out against it?
I think, first of all, the most important thing to realize, the most important ramification of this, it's going to take support for the war, which was already lacking,
right,
and I think really reduce it. I mean, people are going to say, what are we doing fighting over there when the Pakistanis are helping the Taliban? I mean, I think it's going to seriously erode confidence in the war. That's
and you know,
one.
that's a very kind of nuts and bolts way of looking at it, but that way people, what you're describing
Absolutely.
is what people are seeing.
I mean, I heard you discuss in the first hour the ramifications on this, ramifications on that. For the people, it's going to be, what in God's name are we doing over there? And that's an important fact. Now, how that translates in the election is very difficult, because the Republicans in Congress have been the biggest supporters of the war. They backed the president, so it's hard for them to make an issue out of it.
Let me ask you this. Look, we were back here, and I go back to, I don't know if you do, back to 65, 66, 67. They this drew a anti-war candidate, Eugene McCarthy, first into the New Hampshire primary, and after he did fairly well with 42%, it drew Robert Kennedy in against their own president, tore the Democratic Party apart, and led, of course, to a Republican era. If the president is still hanging into Afghanistan in 2011, 2012, do you see an anti-war candidate coming out of the Democratic Party?
It's possible, Pat, and it really depends on how far it deteriorates. But on the other hand, if the troop withdrawal begins in 2011, if there's some signs that we're trying to get out of there, and I heard, I think you were talking about if there are only 3,000 American troops, we still have a presence. But if we start to begin to reduce our presence, I think that's probably enough to keep an anti-war candidate out of the race. Remember, in Vietnam, Johnson kept building and building and building, and there was no end in sight. If the American people and the left of our party sees a beginning of a withdrawal, I think that
the fascinating thing here is the president's base on this issue is the right. It is conservatives, it is Republicans who believe, I do too, that the president has done a courageous thing trying to win this war in Afghanistan.
That it makes it hard for it to be a 2010 issue.
I think the more...
No, it's a 2010 issue in the fact that the Democrat base is less likely to show up because they're disheartened with everything that's going on.
But in terms of people
that makes
voting,
it an issue in 2010.
It's not a 2010 issue.
No, if people don't vote, that's just as good as a vote for a Republican.
Let me ask you
this,
this,
Democrats don't show up.
You're advising the president, and you've got people out there saying, people in Pennsylvania saying, what in God's name are we doing over there? What's the president's message? How would you tell him to streamline it and explain it?
We're making sure America never gets hit again. We haven't been hit since September 11th, and one of the reasons is it's messy, it's long, it's hard, but it's been largely successful. And Pakistan has always played both ends against itself. That is Pakistan. That is Afghanistan. This is not a region of the world where there's a white flag and a red flag, and you know which is which.
But we needed $300 billion to do that? We needed to do this? We needed to lose 1,000 Americans? I mean, needed
It also
to do
goes
there.
back to the Cold War. The Cold War was a 30-year war. Did we have the stomach to fight it for 30 years, even though it wasn't a hot war? That's what the war against terrorism is going to test the American people over time. Do we have the stomach for decades to fight what's going to be a hot war in some places? We don't know the answer
But
yet.
when you say the
it's
stomach,
no on the Democrat side. Yes, so far on the Obama Republican side. We'll see.
How long are the American people going to take 60 dead kids coming home every single month when we read in the reports here that, you know, part of the Pakistani government, the intelligence services, are plotting and training Afghan Taliban to kill Americans in Afghanistan?
So
you got a sanctuary.
you would bug out and let them keep doing it.
I'm not saying bug out. I'm saying I don't see any way that you can look down the road and see an end to this, successful end to this war. And you got a home front area. You got a home front area, as a practical matter, which is slowly disintegrating.
So what do you do?
Well, I don't think what you told her is going to message the American
You
people.
still haven't answered the question. What do you do?
I think you turn.
Do you pull out?
I don't think we should have stayed in after we knocked him over. And yeah, I would turn around and start out.
So you'd pull out.
And Harry, you have to understand.
Yeah.
And you have to understand. You're hearing this from Pat Buchanan and Joe Scarborough. And Joe
That's why I
Scarborough.
said the politics of this is all
My
over
head
the
is
map.
spinning.
And the answer is, I think the answer is you can't pull out precipitously. I think the president is following the right course. It's a difficult course to follow. Our base has to be mature about it. You can't just leave, for what Ari said. And I think there's a potential for that. You can't just up and leave, but we've got to begin the systematic withdrawal. As far as the American people are concerned, there was a country music song that came out in the middle of the Iraq War, something about why are we there fighting for people who hate us? And that's what the American people are saying this morning. They're saying, good Lord, what are we doing over there?
Ari, can you explain to someone who's been in the room talking about Pakistan, as you just said, has a history of playing both ends, why we publicly have to gush over that country as we've been doing lately, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Robert Gibbs doing it at the podium in the White House, when we know privately that, as you say, they're working both sides of the game?
You know, Willie, the sad, dirty little secret about international relations in so much of the world is that you have the levels of hypocrisy you have to deal with. You have foreign leaders who you have to have good relationships with, and then underneath them, it's turmoil. Pakistan's not the most stable country. It's not a democracy in the reality the way we're a stable democracy. And that means there are all kinds of internal elements they're fighting. And the long-term view and the immediate short-term view is you have to have the Pakistan government be as strong as possible to help us, knowing that nothing is a straight line over there. It's all crooked, it's all circular, and you have to do your best. Now, the alternative is, what do you do when you have an unstable ally, but you need Pakistan's support? It's messy.
But of course, the answer to that, and I think Ari's right, but the answer to that is, why are American men and women dying for that? Why? It makes no sense.
But exactly, the governor said, look, you said it's all crooked, it's all circular, we don't know what's going on, it's unstable, and yet we got to put all these American lives on the line every single month, endlessly, and Americans are going to say, no, you're selling me, trying to sell me something, I don't want to buy it
Well, that
anymore.
was my point about the long war. Will they say no or not? But remember what happened before, and that was 9/11, when Al-Qaeda was allowed to marry up with the Taliban, and Pakistan supported the Taliban.
You got Al-Qaeda
and so you've
in
got
Pakistan.
all of that still churning out there, and you don't know which way that's going to go in the future.
They're in Pakistan,
Not that simple.
they're in Yemen, they're in Somalia, they're in North Africa.
And they're on the run. And I credit President Obama for that. Well, he's been very aggressive and very vigorous in going after.
You got to create a whole new country, a democracy, and have Karzai in order to prevent Al-Qaeda from going back into
you
this
just have to prevent
Texas-sized
Al-Qaeda
country?
from coming back. You don't have to create a democracy. You can't create a democracy over
there.
You
need 100,000 troops to prevent them from coming back here.
I'd go with whatever the military advises on that. I'm not sure what the right number is.
I want to show you what's in this morning's Wall Street Journal.